can go to as a parent to review and have a conversation with my teenager about kind of what could happen if he's in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I don't have anything posted from our unit, but I can look into that, and I can see if we can get something put together. I like that idea, though.
So would this go on our website?
We can't put this one up, but I'll try to see if I can do something, summarize it or something for y'all.
Okay,
But I like
okay.
that idea.
Okay, and in that situation with the boy whose parents said that you couldn't go in the house, so what happens to him and the parents?
So it's a very interesting because the parents are out of town at the time of the incident. We can't prove that they knew or should have known there was a party. So they, in fact, did not get charged at that one. The child, we wanted to reward him for making that good decision about
Letting you in.
informing us, letting us in, letting us know there was in fact an unconscious person instead of just shoving him into a closet. We made that discretion, that choice, and we wanted to reward him for actually doing what he should have done. So we did not charge him with any furnishing charges for that night. Yes.
Just a quick question. So when we need to call the police or help, is it 911 or is it another number?
You can use 911. It's the easiest one to remember.
Okay.
The main difference between the non-emergency number and the emergency number is non-emergency will put you into a waiting queue just so we have some people available to take these 911 calls. If you do want to use the non-emergency number, please, we do highly recommend it because, in fact, if there is an emergency, we would like to have enough operators available to answer calls. But if you can't remember, just dial 911. It's the easiest thing to do.
I just wanted to add one point about the drunk driving issue and driving, because it is, as Corporal Arsenault talked about, it's horrific in terms of the impact in numbers. If you think that the number of people that died in the Vietnam War from the United States was in the 55,000 person range, that's about how many traffic deaths we used to have nationally in the United States. Now, a fair number were alcohol impaired, but it's the most dangerous thing that you and I and most people do every day is get in the car and drive. It's how most of our police officers who lost their lives in the last 10, 20 years lost their lives was related to a crash, sometimes a high-speed crash going after somebody. So you probably will already have that conversation if your child is 18. You probably talk to them about not driving while impaired, but it's critical to talk to them about not being a passenger in a car of a driver who's impaired or drugged. And that is at least as likely to happen, maybe more likely than them driving, because they're going to be a passenger probably more often than they're a driver. So they have to know what to say and how not to give into peer pressure and what to do when they're confronted with that situation about getting in a car with a friend who shouldn't be driving, and what to do, like take away the keys or find a way to stop that person from driving, but by all means don't get in the car with them.
It's a really good point. I'll say that as much as it happens, most times the drunk driver that doesn't die, as surprising as it, and a lot of times because they don't know what's coming, they don't tense up. If the two stories we had with Austin Hall and with Kevin, both of them survived. It was their passengers that died. And a lot of people are, well, I'm not the one drunk driving. Still, it's not worth it. Don't get into that car. Fine alternative means don't, take the keys. If you don't feel comfortable taking the keys, call a parent, call the police. Ultimately, no one wants to call us because they feel like they're going to, rat their friends out, or as they would say. But in all reality, what are you in fact doing? Because you have to live with that decision. Because if they were to let their friend go, and that person dies or one of their friends die, they have to live with the fact that, they could have stopped that death. But for the rest of their life, it's going to be in the back of their head that they were partly responsible for it.
You talked about how if you just call 911 or emergency, they're not comfortable for committing a crime or contributing to a crime.
Elaborate a little bit more?
I don't know, can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. So with that law, it basically states that you cannot be charged with certain sections. So if there was a homicide in the house, does not qualify. It's going to be for possession of drugs, possession of alcohol, furnishing. For those crimes, the person who calls 911 to get aid for them and the person they call 911 to get aid for are immune. There is an exception to it, and the reason why the legislators put an exception to it is if I'm knocking on the door because I already know about the underage drinking party and you call 911, and we see it quite frequently. Like, well, I called 911. Yes, but we're already here. If law enforcement has already information to lead them to it, you're not immune from it. But does that answer your question?
That's really vague. I mean, there's a lot of gray in there.
Welcome to Maryland
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
Exactly
I can
right.
tell you that the state's attorney in Montgomery County is interpreting it broadly in the sense that we're not looking to prosecute in those cases where someone has called 911 to save the life or prevent a tragedy. So we want to encourage people to use the Good Samaritan Law, and we're not trying to trick people, into calling and then having them get in trouble for it. So there's a lot of latitude there if the person is doing it to save a life and to prevent a tragedy.
Yes.
Two questions, one for each of you. It sounds like you're saying there's almost like a phenomenon, like is there a thing happening in Montgomery County, underage drinking parties, a term I never even heard used before that you almost use like an acronym, and the world outside is aware of this and is sort of targeting our homes? Like is it like it almost sounds like an active criminal plot.
Oh, no, it's
in
a
the world
very-
to target our homes. Is that, am I overreading you? Is this?
It happens everywhere. It's nationwide. Montgomery County, I'm sure, is a rich target for many reasons because we have a lot of things in Montgomery County. I wouldn't say that's any more, any less anywhere else. I wouldn't know. But I can say that from the law enforcement perspective, we're seeing it quite frequently.
So like every weekend, do you deal with an underage, at least one underage drinking party that's a mess?
Oh, at least, yes. We have quite a few. And the numbers, it all kind of depend. I mean, we have small parties where we literally have 3 or 4 or 5 people. But we also have underage drinking parties that are, they have field parties. And the field parties are, we've had 200 plus. We've even had houses with 200 plus people inside of them. So yeah, it all kind of differs. A lot of times we look at the different seasons. Holiday task force, why we created task force is because that's one of the parts during the year, times during the year, that we see the highest problems. The night before Thanksgiving, just as a heads up, is one of the largest drinking nights, if not the largest drinking night of the year for underage drinking. Also for just DUIs in general too. Because everyone's coming home from school, they're all back from the holidays, they're all wanting to celebrate together, their friends are probably just turning around 21 because they're the older college kids that are just coming back into town, they still have younger friends. There's a whole bunch of different reasonings. Family members are now back home for just regular adults, everyone wants to go out with their family members, brothers, sisters, whoever's visiting. So that's one of the big nights, and then also when Christmas break comes, we have a lot of drinking as well, because all the students are off of school, a lot of the college students are in between semesters and coming back. So that's the time that in New Year's Eve we have, so that's the time when we try to really hit it the hardest because we know that's going to be a large problem.
I would recommend having a contract with your child regarding both things like how to handle a situation where they're at a party and they can't get home safely.
Yes.
Or how to use the internet appropriately.
So
have a written contract or a really clear understanding with them about what they should do in a certain situation and what you expect. And it's good if it's in writing because then there's more accountability and you can talk about it. But they need to know that if they're in a situation where they're stuck miles away and they can't get home safely, that they can call you and that's what you want them to do.
The parent Samaritan exception.
Yeah.
And we even talk about having code words. If you want to just like, hey, thanks, have a good night, Mom. You get that message like, oh, she never says have a good night. There's something going on. And then have you show up, say, you know what, you need to get home, you have this in the morning, whatever, and make you the bad guy. So that they don't have to feel as if they're diming anything out, as if they're going to be the issue or anything. You're the bad guy, and it's just, just the role that you have to take.
My question for you is, particularly, a school like McLean where impulsivity and ADHD, these are big, real issues for us. Everything you say makes sense, and it's just, how do you have techniques and
Well, repetition.
How do you stop
Repetition. I am actually not an attorney, but people assume I am because I work for the state's attorney's office. But attorneys have a practice when they go to trial of telling juries what they're going to tell them, then they tell them what they told them and how to interpret that. So repetition. Most people don't get something the first time. So repetition. Think twice before you post
Stop it.
once.
It's
Um,
stopping.
Never post when you're angry, upset. Never post. Certain things, catchphrases they can remember, but it is important. Once is not enough. A lot of repetition. That's how people become great at things, as they repeat them, and that's how they master them. And since they're, you have a combination of issues where they might have less impulse control. Plus, teenagers have less impulse control generally than and children than most adults. again, it's just important to emphasize and come back to things and not think one time is enough. They're going to get it the first time. So the types of presentations that we tend to make are very repetitive because we're making the same point over and over again so that it sinks in.
I know, we're supposed to sleep tonight.
It's not Friday.
I'm actually curious if you all give this presentation to the students.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
You are-
we're gonna have them back to do this.
Okay.
Actually, and getting on that, Frankie and I have spent a lot of time on this as well. And we got to this because we have another officer who works with us, Detective Britta Thomas, who's come in and talked to the girls and the boys. We do stuff on a regular basis for them, but just like we were saying, is that you can do it once, and 2 minutes after they walk out the door, what you just said is gone. So we hit them again and again and again. And yes, we constantly throw this stuff at them, because if we don't, they're gonna not pay attention to it. The hope is that you get 1 or 2 kids that are, you've come a long way. So absolutely, we're gonna have them back. But we do this, this is not the only time we do this. We do it 2 or 3 times a year. I know I do work with kids individually. I know, Frankie does work with stuff, and so does Molly and the other counselors as well. We hit constantly. We've had stuff that happens all the time. We're always talking to them about it.
Do you have SAG clubs or anything related to the
No,
student?
we're just not big enough for stuff like that, but we,
Why not?
we're-
I'm sorry.
and we're just,
What's a SAG?
we're working on stuff
Students
like that.
Against Drunk Driving.
Now that we've gotten to be big enough, that's certainly something that we're talking about. Absolutely.
Is that something, because I was involved with that way back in high school, is that something that's still going on in high schools? Students against drunk driving?
I do not know about that program. We don't really, we handle teaching programs, but I'm sure that the individual clubs and schools
Yes.
throughout the county have some similar.
Yeah, there's some.
Destructive
Yeah.
decisions.
Right.
Yes, I've heard of that one before, yes.
Yeah, they
they've
brought it a little bit.
expanded beyond drunk driving.
And a lot of them, they'll actually, we come out for what we call the every 15 minutes project, and it's for certain schools, it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of planning on the school's part. But we try to join in with it. For the larger schools, it's a lot easier. But it's basically, parents who get involved. The parents write an obituary for their child. Every so many minutes, we kill off a child, where we come into the classroom, we read off the obituary, we take out the student, we put makeup on them to make it look like they were in a fatal collision and died, and they can't talk to anyone for the rest of the day, and they have to see what it's like to be removed, like what it'd be like for that kid to no longer be there.
Yeah, I did that with my daughter, and she was a senior at WJ, and it was a powerful, powerful thing, because she really wanted to do part of it. And to write that piece is one thing. You actually literally have to do it, and then to watch what happens. I was there that day working with the principal to watch how they go through the entire school, and Frankie and I have talked about doing that here. It's a major undertaking, and it's very powerful. It's very, very scary, and it can really, it can literally, some of the younger kids at the high schools get freaked out by it, because they actually see this happen. You can imagine having your child taken out of a class as the class is going on and not exist for the day, and they dress up differently. It's a very, very powerful thing. And, we talk about doing all these things. Our issue sometimes it's that shock value, which can put kids over the edge. There's wonderful, wonderful things we do, and we've tried a lot of stuff, and that's a very, very powerful program.
It is. Yeah, it is. But yeah, we're very happy to come to McLean, talk to the students here.
Scare them.
Uh-huh.
The other half is the culpability question. In a scenario, say, where a child comes to you and says, "Mom, look what's happening online," and maybe it's like you said, the nude photo. My reaction would be, or this is an adult issue, give me a copy and delete this off and block whatever's happening. And then take it to, say, the school or the next adult. Is that exposing parents? And I'm sure the kids think the same thing. They hear on one hand, we need to handle it, but if I save it and forward it, now I'm culpable. So I guess I'm asking a little bit for a roadmap to that issue.
What would you suggest to a parent?
For this one, as bad and weird as it is to say, we recommend not deleting it.
Okay.
Notify us immediately. We're 24/7. We'll come out. And the reason why is because it helps, it actually, in fact, makes it more difficult for us to be able to do our investigation. There are so many different things, as Phil Andrews was talking about, that we can go back and we can look, and it's essentially like a digital signature, and it's what we call IP addresses and things like that, and it can tell me specifically what computer sent that. I can also look into different things like what Facebook accounts might have sent it, who's it registered, where they live. I can find all this information, but the more it gets altered, the more it gets changed, the more it gets forwarded on, is the more work that we have to do, because now we have to do multiple warrants or multiple subpoenas, and it can take forever to track it down. So it also deletes part of the chain of evidence.
Right.
And it makes it more complicated for the prosecutors when they go to court that, once it's been altered so many times, it's difficult to permanently link it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, so I would agree. You want to save the evidence.
The phone from the child.
Yes.
For the period, and
But
then
freeze it
save
down.
to this.
Yep.
And does
Yeah.
that include for like the bullying issues or the,
Mhm.
all of
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is not a McLean situation, but it's
No.
another school in there. So when the school says that they're not responsible for any of this because
We-
it happens after hours, is that
we
something
have
that's
a
changed over the last couple of years?
Well, I can just give you, I'll tell you, because I know how we deal with it here, and it's happened recently, and we deal with it here. If a kid brings something to an adult, or a parent brings something, I say, please take a screenshot, please send me the actual evidence of it, because that's the only way we can work with it. It's really hard to work with hearsay, and I know that we've had past stuff where we've actually handed it over, when we've handed it over to the law enforcement and whatnot, and we tell the parents, no, if a kid's bringing you something, take the snapshot, take pictures of it with anything that you have, because that's concrete stuff, and, then we hand it over. But our policy is if it comes into our community, whether that be after hours or the next morning, if a kid's getting something and I get a phone call, we've had something happen very recently where, I got it from a parent, I got it from a kid, I talked to Mrs. Diamond, and as we know, we dealt with it school-wide, the very next day. So we don't sweep it under the carpet, we don't say you're okay, and I know you're gonna get the kids say all the time, well, I'm tattling on somebody, I'm gonna get somebody else in trouble, and I try to tell the kids, no, you didn't get anybody in trouble. That's not your goal here. The person that put that stuff up there did something that they weren't supposed to, and all you're doing is bringing it to the attention as a community member. So, I don't know how other schools deal with, but we deal with stuff hand-on very, very quickly and and appropriately.
Mhm. So, yeah, save the evidence, but report it immediately to the authorities or to the principal or, the person that can do something about it, and don't send it to anybody else. Don't send it to, you don't want to be in a situation.
Not everybody is nice as here, so that if your kid comes back and they say, well, the school's saying that they can't do anything because it happened after hours, at that point, it's skip them and go on to you all.
all schools have their own administrative policies. Sometimes it's gonna be both. If there is some sort of child pornography involved, we need to be notified of it, whether the school does something or not, and we need to be notified as soon as possible. Because the biggest goal, and as you saw in Phil's presentation, these things move quick, and it's easier if we can stop it as soon as possible. Because if you think about it, if it's being sent to two people send it to two people, now we're dealing with 4 people or 6 people, and it multiplies rapidly. If we can stop it as close to the source as we can, it's going to have a lot more of an impact. And then once people hear that it's been dealt with, then it's going to hopefully not go out. And I tell you what, the amount of damage it caused to students, this whole Snapchat, and do y'all know what Snapchat is? I'm assuming y'all do. Okay. Are you familiar with how it works? Your kids are going to tell you, they're going to say, I will know if I were to send a photo and someone were to take a screenshot, I would know. Is that what they tell you?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's what they're always going to tell you, because they don't think beyond it. So for those people who have Snapchat on one phone and they have another phone, this is how easy it is to take a photo, and they're never going to know what happened. And that's what they're doing. They're taking photos of a photo. They aren't going to know that it was screenshot, because it doesn't know that there's another phone, another iPad, or another computer present. And then that gets forwarded out. So a lot of times these kids aren't thinking steps ahead, and these are the things that we're dealing with. And that's what we want to tell your kids, like, look, think about the big picture. This thing isn't permanently erased. Anything you put on the internet, make sure you're not going to be ashamed if I see it, because chances are I'm going to come across it at some point or another.
Right, front page of the Washington Post rule. If you don't mind seeing on front page of the Washington Post next year, go ahead and post it.
It's so hard to get, I don't know, like I have an 18-year-old.
But more immediate, if you wouldn't want, well,
They just don't, it's like my son's like,
Yeah.
Mom, we don't think of privacy the way you do. It's like they've been so indoctrinated.
well, they may have a different view to some degree, that's true.
Yeah.
Because they see celebrities do these things and maybe not be hurt by it. But there's still a lot of potential
Oh, there is. I'm just saying,
argument
just
with,
some of the-
do you want me to see it? Because I'm gonna, you're gonna see it. Do you want the parent to see it? Because imagine the parent will see everything, and not just a friend. I think that still has some impact on. I hope so.
But we talk to the kids, because I've had kids that have come back with kids that graduated here that have talked about the fact that they put stuff up and then they try to go get a job, and we've talked.
Yeah.
I was telling one that we have a graduate who's now working for the police in North Carolina, but she was interning with the police, the detectives up in the state police. And the first question they asked her after finding out her name and everything, the first question they asked her is, do you have a Facebook page? And she said yes. And the second question they asked her is, can we see it?
Yeah.
And she was like, and hers was fine, but she then went back to everybody else and said, let me tell you something.
Uh-huh.
This is the real world out there. We also know from our college camp, we've known kids that literally, I can't tell you specifically what, but because of, colleges, they will search these databases and they will, I mean, they're not gonna tell you that's why your kid didn't get into college, but they have, they patrol this stuff. And if it's out there, I tell the kids, it is searchable and it's gonna come back to bite you one day or the other. It's out there. And the only way you can do it is over and over again with stories and stuff like this, and just it's a partnership. It's not like, you're a bad person, but you gotta be aware of what's going on with your kid.
And they'll actually not only just ask to see it, they're gonna ask for your password.
Right.
There's a lot of law enforcement agencies, when we apply, they say, we want your Facebook username and your Facebook password, and that's how they do your background investigation. That's part of it. And they go through your messages, they go through your postings, they go through everything within your personal life, looking for stuff.
On the spot?
Yes.
Yep, and actually, they hold on to it, and because they have to finish their background investigation on you, so they may have it for a couple of days. They'll tell you when they're done with it. And then the other side is that there's also software where they can upload a photograph of your face. I don't know, how many of y'all have iPhone? Did the most recent iPhone update? Did you notice how it can track people's faces?
No.
No, yeah? Okay, there's a new thing on there. It's going to go through all your photos, and it's going to pick you out of all your photos and your friends, and it'll categorize them. Same thing for online. So a lot of these schools can actually go into this database, they can submit a photograph of whoever they're looking for, and they're going to go search in the web, and it brings back all the photos of people who look like that's going to be the person.
Oh,
So
boy.
once
Are you
you pull
telling
it-
them all this, the
Is there
kids?
But, the answer is yes, but just the same thing that you're
No.
having at home, it's like the kids like, oh, we're just the adults telling them, and I think what's more powerful also is when we bring some of the kids in who've done this and say, guess what, this is what it is, but when you get the fact is that, because you all know, teenagers, they don't listen to anybody, they don't want to, they know better, right?
Right.
Yes, we are telling them, we're showing them the stuff, and we're doing this kind of stuff, and it's exhausting, and all I can share to you is that the other thing is that this is a partnership, this isn't about you against them, this is you working with them, and the fact is that working on that, so that, yes, it's out there, knowing where your kids are, and I think it's great, if you can get your kids in a crisis moment to call you and not beat up on them, not yell at them, not get them in trouble, because they're reaching out to you because they know they're in a difficult situation, they've done something wrong. You need to reward that, applaud that, and be thankful for that because they're reaching out to you. I mean, I can't tell you how many parents have had that, then the parent punishes them for that. Well, that's the last time they're gonna reach out to you again. It's the thing about being positive. I know that's really hard for parents, but that's a huge thing you can do, is that I'm there for you. Any time of day, 24/7, call me, and I think the codes are phenomenal. I mean, whatever you do with the kids, and I've had parents that have said, my kid called me at 2 o'clock in the morning because they were in a party, and I just went and got them. And it was the thank you for calling me, end of discussion, because they obviously learn, and it's just a constant thing. So all I can tell you is to be empowered with them, but it's a partnership.
Right, and so the police and our police department has a great record doing thorough background investigations, which is what you want before you give someone the power to arrest somebody and a weapon. You want that kind of scrutiny, and every police officer who gets selected in Montgomery County is beating out dozens and dozens of other applicants for each of those spots. We get, but I think you said we got 2,000 applications for the last class.
As,
of about-
2,000, only 16, or that was for my class. 2,000 applicants, 16 people selected. So
Right,
it's very
so-
selective.
So it's really very competitive, and when departments let their background standards slip, like Washington D.C. did about 25 years ago, they paid the price. And, lots of trouble with some of those hires because they let people in who shouldn't have been in. But it's a surrogate. Looking at someone's social media is a surrogate for catching them in an unguarded moment. So people post things because they are taking it very casually, or they're not thinking about how it can be used. But it's revealing often about their true character. And so, and even if it's not, they're in trouble. So it's a problem for people who don't take what they post with the warning that everything can be public. And obviously you don't want everything you write to be public, but you have to assume that it could be. The State Attorney's Office has made cases on what was on suspects' social media pages, that they posted photos of themselves with other gang members, that then become very useful in identifying, the other people that might have been involved in the crime and tracing where the phone call came from. Well, you can't prove they were in the house, but their phone was in the house at the time of the crime because that was positioned through through satellite. So it has raised all kinds of new issues with law enforcement as well that are big issues. Some have issues, privacy issues attached to them as well. But everything you post, you have to assume could become public.
I hate to be the one to call the evening to an end, but we do have to respect our speakers' time as much as yours. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
and,
Thank you.
Thank you.